Welcome to Basic Brewing Video. I'm James Spencer.
Wait, James, hold on.
What?
My
I'm
show.
sorry. This is your show.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Of course
I have it.
I know you guys are professionals, so that's. Yeah, I was gonna let you take the reins, but welcome to What's New with Mead. We are chatting with Steve and James from Basic Brewing Radio and Video and all of the amazing programs that they've run over the years. They're here to chat about their experience brewing, and I've had a lot of fun deep diving into you guys' past a little bit and seeing what you've done. Probably stuff you don't even remember doing at this point. That's kind of the fun part.
I don't remember last week, so that's a safe bet.
You guys have been running this show for quite some time, and even just in the YouTube sphere, your first video you posted on YouTube was 15 years ago, and I think it might have been the second or third one. There was a video of you guys sitting in your not cornfield. What did you had planted?
My barley field.
Your barley field, and you guys are like behind the barley. You're drinking stuff too. It was just really fun to see. But tell us about when Basic Brewing started and kind of what was the origin of it.
Well, way back. Way back. We recorded the first episodes on wax cylinder, and
right. We weren't emptying on our belts in those days.
That was the fashion. Back in the day, back in 2004, I quit the corporate world. I was working in corporate communications for a big company, and I decided to go out on my own and do media production and voiceover narration and things like that. And I knew how to do, video stuff and web stuff and multimedia and DVDs. And so, I'd always wanted to do a project that I produced myself. And so I said, well, what do I know what to do? And I said, well, I know how to homebrew. And Steve and I started homebrewing at about the same time. And so I thought it would be more interesting if I invited Steve to be on set of our Introduction to Extract homebrewing DVD. Mm-hmm. And so we did, and we produced this DVD, and I started selling it out to the public. I was hoping to, hook into homebrew stores and start selling through there. But, after about a year of making cold calls to homebrew stores and trying to get them interested in it to begin with, and then, they wanted to see the DVD, and, most of them were receptive. But anyway, in June of 2005, iTunes put podcasting or Apple put the podcast directory on iTunes. And so before then, it was just kind of a niche thing that nobody knew about. And so then it was a niche thing that a few people knew about. But with the podcast directory, you could get seen and people could do searches and find you. And so the month after Apple put podcasting on iTunes, we started the audio podcast. And then later on that year, we started doing video episodes because Apple had come out with the video iPod. So if you go to basicbrewingvideo.com, you can still see all of the episodes throughout the years. And some of them are tiny, tiny. Like that first one's like watching a postage stamp because the resolution on those things wasn't so good. So we produced four other DVDs.
5 altogether.
Yeah. All grain brewing, decoction mashing, and basic winemaking. And lagering. And so, DVDs aren't the thing. They're kind of like the 8-track tapes of today. So, we still have them for sale on the website, but we don't sell it nearly as many as we used to. But now we just do the audio podcast and the video podcast, and we put the videos on YouTube. And we've been going strong. This week. I will post episode number 861 on the audio side. So,
oh my gosh,
still going strong.
Okay, so first of all, the fact that you guys have so much experience and you've been kind of deep diving, as we've talked about, you guys have spent a lot of time testing and recipe testing and stuff. What would you say if you had a pie chart of the brews over the years, what percentage of the pie is like beer, and what percentage is wine, and what percentage is mead, and so on and so forth.
You talk, Steve. Your turn. I talked for half an hour.
Well, I was going to say it would be different. James mostly brews beer, so his pie chart would be a lot of beer. I'm probably more balanced in how I do it because I make a fair amount of wine, a fair amount of mead, and a fair amount of beer. So I guess mine would probably be about roughly thirds. I mean, roughly about a third of each. I mean, and it would depend on the year. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, I mostly made beer. And then within the last 10 or 15 years, I've kind of, I won't say moved on from beer because I certainly still brew beer, but I really enjoy making mead and became very interested in that aspect of the hobby. And then, I make some wine now and then, generally just from the kits that you can buy, the Wine Expert or the was it RJS? I can't remember the major brand of kits. And I like to just make fruit wine. But generally, if I'm going to make a fruit wine, I'd rather make a fruit mead because I just think they're better.
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes you're just cheap, and so you use sugar instead of honey, and you got a fruit wine.
Yeah.
But basically, so that's my take on that. I enjoy fermenting, and actually, James and I have both moved into doing a lot of food fermenting.
Okay.
Making sauerkraut, making home fermented jalapenos, our own sauerkrauts, those kombuchas. I've probably brewed kombucha maybe twice, so I'm not a kombucha guy, although I really like it. But I'm really into fermentation. Period. Whether it's green beans or it's barley, it's all good.
Do you feel like the science from beer brewing and everything else, and as far as alcohol brewing, transfers pretty easily over to food, or are there some like pitfalls and things you had to figure out that maybe were different?
Oh, I don't know. I think just a general knowledge of how to treat food, particularly with sanitation. I think sanitation, whether you're canning tomatoes or you're putting up a 5-gallon batch of mead, sanitation is still the one thing that'll just absolutely ruin your product. You can make a lot of mistakes. You can not back sweeten the mead just so. You can maybe over hop it the beer, or under hop the beer a little bit, and it'll still be a good beer. But if your sanitation's off, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, I think that the sanitization is the primary link between fermenting food and fermenting. I mean, beer and mead, they are food, but fermenting for alcohol and fermenting for, like a tartness or lactic sourness. The food side is mostly about. It's not all about it, but it's mostly about salt, and sort of suppressing the bad natural organisms that will spoil the food and allowing the good ones that will come up and give you a nice tartness, and together with the salt preserve the food, which is why people made fermented foods or fermented anything is to preserve a food product. I mean, beer is essentially preserving grain. Wine is preserving grapes, and honey doesn't need to be preserved, but it's the same principle.
Yeah.
So cleanliness is the most important step in both practices, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I speaking of, I guess, liquid food, I did share some liquid food with y'all in the form of mead. And I figure we can I sent a couple things, and I figure we got to burn through them. So whatever you want to choose first, I'll let you guys pick your poison, and I'll explain how we got here. Or how we got
Steve,
there.
you want to go first, or you want me to pick first?
Well, I was going to say I'm not sure if we have the exact same thing. I think we do.
We got three of the same thing.
Cucumber lemon.
Yeah, I've got that one.
Okay. I was going to say, why don't we do that one first, just because I think it's going to be the lightest.
Okay.
And move from light flavors to heavier flavors. I bet would be.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so this is I I'll explain as you guys are opening and everything. Okay. So this is I've been recipe testing some cucumber mead options. I've always thought it'd be an interesting flavor profile. And I really wanted to reach into that, like, like you walk into a spa or somewhere and they have that big container of water and they've thrown cucumbers in. I wanted to kind of achieve that sort of profile. So I hope it's transferred well. But it is honey and some cucumbers, obviously. A little bit of lemon juice, not as much as I think I should have put in there. But it's supposed to be just like a 4% easy drinker. It's really not too hard to make. I've been, in my testing, I've been trying to avoid making it taste like pickles. So if it tastes like pickles, then I've not achieved what I wanted. And oddly enough, the way I think I've avoided that has been to introduce cucumbers in a secondary stage and to introduce them in a cold chamber. So go ahead and get the mead, 40, 50 degrees, and then add those in. And it's more of like a cold steeping. And it's interesting, a different method than I had thought I would have to do, honestly.
And is that post or pre-stabilizing? In other words, have you...
Right. I think it was post. But I don't think, there's not really any sugar in that cucumber. I definitely did stabilize it to back sweeten. But I don't remember in this circumstance. I don't remember. I probably did stabilize it now that I think about it. I normally do. That's kind of my default. If I'm going to back sweeten ahead, I'm just going to go ahead and pre-stabilize it ahead of time.
Well, whatever you did, it worked. I mean, the character of the cucumber is nice and fresh. It's not like a pickle at all. You taste it and it's like, oh, yep, it's like because there's honey in there as well. It's like a sweet cucumber, which is, opposite of what we're used to thinking about pickles. But it's a nice, it was carbonated as well. Did you say it was stabilized? Did you force carbonate it?
Yep. It's been in a keg. I still have a little bit over there, actually. I forgot I had some, but yeah, I force carbed 5-gallon keg, and then I canned some up to ship out to people. And
it's very good.
It's really, really good. All these youngsters with their canning equipment, Steve.
I know, right? I'm jealous.
I'm envious. Yeah, for sure. No, it's so what kind of honey did you use?
This was, I could probably find, let me look exactly. I think in my testing I probably just went and bought some cheaper honey. This is going to be kind of taboo, but I have recently, in a lot of my big recipes, I use, like when you walk into Walmart, that pure and simple 5-pound. If I'm doing something that's fruited or is, I'm not really totally trying to highlight the honey, I'll use something like that. And so people are probably going to revolt and unsubscribe from my channel now, but
no, let them.
No, don't waste your money on something that's going to be, that's going to be hidden, in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, I don't know nothing, but if you were to spend a lot of money on a fancy honey, like I saw your maybe one of your recent videos, you had like a radish honey. You don't want to spend a lot of money on a fancy honey that you're going to cover up with a fruit flavor or something like that.
Yeah.
If it's a good quality honey, I mean, there are bad honeys out there that aren't really honey, as I understand. They're mostly like sugar or something.
Right.
As long as it is a proper honey product, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed about.
Mm-hmm. I don't either. I always look for that little, honeybee sign, the little guarantee of this is pure honey. I don't know how truthful that is. I mean, you could lie, but I at least look for that. And I agree with you. I generally get, for a melomel, something like this, I just use a big box quality honey, as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. And like James said, I don't see the point in spending 3 times the amount of money on honey that's going to get covered up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reiterating what you said, but I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So this is it says it's 4%, which is really nice. It's extremely drinkable and sessionable. Do you remember do you have a like on a do you have like a sliding scale when you are looking at, say, a low gravity mead versus a higher or low alcohol mead versus a higher alcohol mead? Is there a sliding scale on how much you back sweeten? I mean, does this have like a lower finishing gravity after the back sweetening than you would say a bigger mead? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think it really depends on what I'm trying to push. Like I have a couple that my apple cinnamon, which I think I sent you guys a can of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That one I have like I always try to finish between like 10:15 and 10:20, and it's just that sweet spot where I found out it really highlights the apples and then that contrasts the cinnamon. This one was more of like I just kind of kept adding honey until I felt like I had enough honey character that wasn't going to overshadow this cucumber side. So I don't really have like a strict like, well, I'm shooting for 10:15 or 10:20 unless I've done the recipe a bunch. Most of the time it's just kind of like, what do I think this needs? And often I would say that I probably do land between 10:10 and 10:20 as my final gravity, like more often than not. Although recently I've been pushing it more. I don't know how much commercial mead you guys have had, but a
Money.
new trend is to really end with a sweet mead. Sometimes like 1060, 1070, 1080 as your final gravity.
Oof.
And it is... I'm not trying to go that way because that is expensive and kind of wild, in my opinion. But I do see the merit when you're making something that's like a tart mellow of sorts. And you're like, well, I got to contrast this cranberry that I've added. I got to have a lot of sweetness here to, match what I've done. But yeah, 1010 to 1020 is probably my average and sometimes above, I would say.
Did you say you put lemon juice in there as well?
A little bit, not enough. I realized that, again, this is still...
No, I was going to say, I get it. I mean,
okay.
In addition to the cucumber character, there's a sweetness in there as well, but then there's also a balance of acidity in there that really, it really rounds it out to where it's not flabby. Mm-hmm. I think it's just right.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, it's very tasty.
It's a lot of fun. Cucumber is one of those things that I've thought about for years, and it's on my list of like ones to make. The other flavor profile, somebody mentioned that was like, you should add some basil in that. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I don't really know. I haven't done much testing with that yet, but there might be a point where I try some of that. So it's kind of fun. Cucumber is one of those that's polarizing, though. People are either like, I love it, or, oh my gosh, do not give me that. I hate cucumbers.
I wonder, even though you're not trying for pickle, I wonder if you put some dill in there. Whether that'd be a fun addition, even, the pickle, you have the sourness in there as well. But I just wonder if and I'm not saying that this needs it, but this would be another variation. If you put some dill in there, whether that would add just a little bit of complementary character to it.
Yeah.
But like I say, it's fine the way it is. I think it's really good.
So I was a little
nice first choice. A
little bit inspired by a guy named Carvin Wilson, who does a lot of stuff with mead, and he has a cucumber bean recipe that uses 20 pounds of cucumber in a 5-gallon batch. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go that heavy because that's a lot of cucumber.
Bunch of cucumber.
So this was a 5-gallon batch, and I used 5 pounds, and it was about a pound. Basically, it turned out to be like one large cucumber per gallon, and I feel like it is very cucumber heavy for so I can't imagine going 4 times that.
I can't either. That to me sounds not very good. So I won't dismiss this other fellow's mead because it's probably really good, but that just sounds way over the top to me. I'm curious, did you use did you peel the cucumbers or leave them with the skins on?
Yes, so this is my third iteration. First one I didn't do any peeling, and it was like, you got, not I want to say bitterness, but there was some real tannin coming from that skin that I was like, it was weird. I couldn't get over it. And so I peeled the next iteration of it, and I was like, oh, this is much better. And then I did the whole cold steeping thing, and I was like, that's even better. So, because I did a side-by-side. I did a cold steep and then a room temp steep at the same time, tasted them, and the room temp had, I don't know, it had something about it that was a little bit funky to me. And so that's when I decided to do the cold steeping instead. So, different way to
Well,
do it.
Yeah, I think you've struck on something good.
Yeah.
I have something to contribute. You don't have anything to drink, but I don't know if the camera will read that or not.
Ooh.
Steve, does that look at all familiar?
Yeah. Isn't that the first mead we ever made? Or
This
you
is
ever made?
I was cleaning out the basement, and it's kind of nasty. It's got stains on it. Something tried to eat it. There's some holes in the bottom of it. But this is the instruction sheet or sheets. It's a 2-pager out of the first mead kit that Steve and I ever got. We each bought this kit separately from the home brewery back in Fayetteville, back in probably 96.
5 or 6.
Wow. Yeah.
What are those two?
So, shall I read from the St. Bartholomew's Mead Kit instructions for brewing?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Copyright.
Boil for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well, it starts off 10 pounds of brewing honey, 1 ounce of acid blend. Or this is contents of the ingredient kit. 10 pounds of brewing honey, 1 ounce of acid blend, 1 ounce of yeast nutrient, generic yeast nutrient, 4 ounces of oak chips, 2 packs of Cote de Blanc's yeast, 1 ounce of potassium sorbate stabilizer, and 1 pack of wine sparkle clarifier.
Okay, interesting.
And then under necessary equipment, it says sanitizers such as iodophor or chlorine bleach.
Oh, man. Wow.
You can use chlorine. I did an interview with Charlie Talley, the founder of 5-Star Chemicals. You know, they make Star San and they do make iodophor and powdered brewery wash and all those. And he gave me the recipe where you can actually use chlorine bleach to make a no-rinse sanitizer. Oh. But he essentially said if you mix it wrong, you'll kill your family. You know, something like that. I'm exaggerating, but anyway, so that's, and I won't go through the whole. You know, it's a big long.
Does it say to boil honey? What does it say for like preparing your honey? Because that's a whole other thing too.
Well, it says run about a gallon of water cold from the tap in the bottom of your primary fermenter. Inside the gallon of water, pour both jars of brewing honey. Oh, so they go straight into the fermenter.
Okay.
So good for them. Mm-hmm. And just add enough tap water to bring it up to 5 gallons. The actual starting gravity at this point will be about 1076. However, when mixing honey and water, as in this recipe, it's almost impossible to get an accurate hydrometer reading. The honey is still heavy and will stay at the bottom of the fermenter, which is probably accurate. But what Steve and I did was we took this recipe, and it actually turned out really well. Mm-hmm. We fermented it dry, didn't back sweeten it, and we carbonated it. We primed it in the bottle, and we came out with this really champagne-y product that was it was delicious. I mean, we made some for a friend's wedding, and I remember sitting out on the patio, at this friend's house, or these friends. We were friends, we love them both. I remember we were sitting and drinking mead and saying, why are we making anything else? This is so easy to make and so good.
It takes no time at all either. It's just so much quicker than beer brewing for sure too.
Well, but back then we didn't, we didn't understand nutrients very well, or how to move a fermentation along. I think the first mead I made, I believe it set in the primary fermenter like 9 months, 8-9 months.
Oh, wow.
It's been a long time.
And I remember putting it in the hottest room in the house because I wanted the yeast to be happy.
You're like, just ferment, please.
Mine was in the coat closet.
Oh man.
So regardless of what we did, the meads, it turned out well.
Yeah,
well enough to keep us doing it for the next almost 30 years.
So
but you Garrett, you asked about my brewing pie earlier.
Yeah.
Mine is more like 95% beer and 5 5, maybe no, not even 5% mead, and then I've been the only wine that I've made. I've made a couple of full batches of wine, and truthfully, that was when we were doing the wine DVD, and I wanted to get video of the process.
Yeah.
But then recently, I've been buying these little 1-gallon kits. That'll make 4 bottles of wine, and that's what I've been doing, and it's super easy, and the wine's actually pretty good.
I've had a couple of those. Like, I was a little leery at first when I'm pouring grape juice out of a bag that has been, like, I look at the back of the box and it's like used by this date. And I'm like, it's pretty dang close to this date. So it's been sitting here for quite some time, and I've always been sketched out, but they turn out pretty good. Those little wine kits are not too shabby.
Yeah, the last one I made was a white wine kit, and the bag that I used, it took me a while to make it, and I pulled out the bag and it was like brown. The concentrated must was like brown, and I said, "Oh, well, I might as well just go ahead and make it." Turned out good.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time it got diluted and fermented and everything, it looks fine and tastes fine, and I don't know nothing about wine, but drinks good. Who knew? But that's what I love. I love that because I can use this little 2-gallon plastic pail that I have, and a 1-gallon jug to make 4 bottles of wine.
Yeah,
super easy.
Well, so do you guys want to open up another one, or do we want to take a beat?
Sure.
You feel warmed up?
We can open up another one. This train is headed down the tracks.
Which one do you want to open next?
Do you want to do the apple cinnamon next?
Sure. Yeah, it's in my hand.
The caption says, "I swear it's not applesauce."
Yeah,
6% ABV.
This is one I make a lot of. I just this year alone, I've probably brewed 30 gallons of it, and given away 30 of it so far. And it's just one I feel like I've got down. I have a video on it, so there's a way people, if they want to make it, I've literally just tried to give out the secret recipe, so to speak, for what's happening. But it's it's apple juice, and then of course honey, and eventually, my little tips in the video are to let it ferment through primary on those things, stabilize it, and then add a medley of apples to get a different flavor combo from the apples.
Is that a metric medley or?
I have a couple I like. I end up using sweet apples like Fuji, Gala, and Pink Lady. Like, those are my favorite ones, but they're all in that sweet category. They don't really have any tartness. And then I come back and add some cinnamon sticks in after a couple weeks, and honey, carbonate it, and that's it. Add some citric acid, make it a little bright. That's what you got right there.
Well, it's crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
It's a little effervescent.
It's a fun one.
It's like grown-up Apple Jacks.
Yeah.
You remember Apple Jacks from? It's not as sweet and it's not Apple Jacks, but it reminds me of that. Cinnamon toasty Apple Jacks. The cinnamon and the apple and it's again really nice and very, very. I say it a lot, but I think it has to be said. It's very, very clean. I mean, there's no defects in it. I mean, that's the first hurdle you got to get over. Is if you give an experienced beer or cider or mead or whatever taster or something, and they catch something right off, it's like it's hard to get past that. But there's none of that in this. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
I'm curious what yeast that you used.
Well, this will be a fun one. I used the K1V1116. I have kind of always gone to that one, and I know it's more champagne strength, but something about it. It always does well with this specific recipe.
Well for you.
So, which is surprising. I didn't think it would, and I used it. I spent a long time trying to develop an apple mead recipe, and what I like about this one is if you take away the cinnamon and keep the same process, it's basically just a very good alcoholic apple juice is what it tastes like. So it's kind of like you could go summer side, when it's hot, and then you could also flip it for the winter, add some cinnamon in.
Well, I guess it's technically a sizer.
Yeah.
Even though you didn't use apple juice, you used the actual apples. I guess technically it's a sizer.
Yeah.
And there's probably a name for a spice sizer
Yeah, I'm sure there's.
that I don't know.
They always
but,
make a ton of names.
But the apple character is very fresh, and it's almost more appley than cider by itself. I don't know if that's possible, but it tastes more like apples than just straight apple cider to me.
Mm-hmm.
When you did you back sweeten it? And if you back sweetened it, did you back sweeten it with honey or with apple juice?
Honey mostly, and then I sometimes will take, if I feel like the apple character isn't quite there, I'll put like one of those 8-ounce cans of concentrate in to a 5-gallon batch and just give it a little bit more on top of that. I've been trying to commercialize this recipe and make it to where it's more viable. If we were to go commercial at some point, it's a little bit tough to do 3 different kinds of apples and, per gallon to have 3 pounds of each apple and blah, blah, blah. Like, it turns into quite the mess. So I've been trying to break things down. I've been using more concentrates. Takes kind of the fun out of it, honestly. A lot of homebrewing is just like, I like to be a little bit MacGyver-ish and like just start grabbing things and like throw it in and see what happens. But obviously at a commercial scale, you can't really be MacGyver.
No.
So,
yeah,
it's not fun.
I mean, people say, "Oh, and isn't homebrewing a lot of work?" Well, yeah, but that's kind of so is knitting. But people don't. You can buy a sweater, but
so is golf.
It's no fun. Oh well, yeah. I was never a golfer.
That's a lot of work.
But this is, if you compare this, say, to, a commercial, what passes as a commercial mass-produced, say, alcoholic cider today, that's just headache juice, in my opinion. Because it tastes artificial. It tastes like it's just nothing but sugar. I think that what the honey brings to this is kind of a natural. And maybe it's my brain playing tricks on me, but maybe, the honey brings kind of a more natural sweetness, to the apples, where it's not just, like a table sugar kind of sweetness. It's a more rounded, and again, you could probably do that. I don't know if you did, but you could probably do this with, your grocery store honey and be just fine.
It actually is. That's the pure and simple honey right there. It's pretty easy. What I like about the recipe is I've got it down to where, most of the time you're like taking gravity readings and stuff. This recipe is one where I've done enough where I just dump it all together and I'm like, I know my starting gravity is 1050 and I walk away. And, it doesn't hurt to double check, but it's one of those where I'm like, okay, I've got this pretty well down at this point.
Well, I have it on a good source that it's almost impossible to get an accurate initial gravity reading.
Well, especially if you're using cold water. They mentioned using cold water instead of, like lukewarm or room temp.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well,
I am curious.
Go ahead.
Definitely
I am certain
the
that the first few meads I made, maybe not this one notwithstanding, I mean, the one that James is reading from, but the instructions called to boil the honey. I mean, it's like, I know I did. The first 2 or 3 meads I made, I was boiling away.
Yeah.
Well, you want to make sure that honey's well integrated.
Oh, yeah.
They must have thought it was impossible to mix honey at that point because it's all about boiling, or maybe they're afraid of, I don't know what they're afraid of necessarily at the point, why boiling was always on the table. So I am curious, like, you guys have been brewing for such a long time, and craft beer, I should say, came around, and I feel like took probably that market by storm. But then also now all these people were like, oh, I can start adding pumpkin pie, just throwing pumpkin pie in my beer, and you get all these kind of crazy combos. What are some things you've seen change over time that you might follow now, like things that you've changed to start doing in the past? Because I know that's like a lot of progression. Just
on our personal home brewing scale. The biggest thing lately is Kvike. That's just it's been around for hundreds of years, but it's the new thing, and it's basically revolutionized. There's a brewery we talked to a brewer, a professional brewer over in Oklahoma at the Tulsa Craft Beer Invitational last year, the last time we were there. And he's switched over to 100% Kvike brewery over there and brewing all kinds of different styles. That's the biggest, most impactful trend I've seen recently. Before that, I think, things like, no chill brewing, which is where you don't chill your wort, you rack it into a plastic container, you put the lid on, and you take it overnight and let it cool down naturally, and then pitch your yeast like the next day. Some people take it to an extreme and pitch the yeast a lot later. I don't do that, but
what's the intent there?
And then,
what's the goal?
And then also brew,
what's the goal?
It started in Australia. Because water in some regions of Australia is so precious. I mean, water's precious everywhere, but it's not very plentiful. And so running gallons and gallons or liters and liters of water through an immersion chiller is extremely wasteful. Whereas if you run off your hot wort into a jerry can, a plastic, they call them jerry cans, and let it cool naturally, and then the next day you rack into a fermenter, or you can pitch directly into that. Especially if you've got a beer that doesn't have any hop character from hops added at the end of the boil or post boil. That's great. You can always dry hop later as well. But it's a way that you could save a lot of energy and some time on brew day as well.
Interesting.
But the other advancement that it's been several years, but Pat Hollingdale down in Australia as well, it came up with brew in a bag, which when we first started brewing, when you were all grain brewing, your goal was to basically miniaturize a commercial brewery. Commercial breweries have like a 3-vessel system. They have mash tuns that are separate. And sometimes they have hot liquor tanks that are separate, and then then they have your brewing kettle, and then so it's like home brewers were mimicking what was happening on the larger scale, and Pat said, rest in peace, he's passed a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. He said, "Why are we doing this? We can mash in our kettle in a bag, and then just take the grain out with the bag, and then we've got our wort. We don't need a separate mash tun." So there, and before that was Denny Kahn and his batch sparging technique, where again, people were mimicking commercial brewing, and as you're lautering, as you're draining out your wort from your mash tun, you're sprinkling water on the top of it, and that's fly sparging. And you're having to match the sparging rates, that from the lautering rates and all this. Denny said, just drain out your first runnings, close the valve, and then put your second brewing water all at once in there, and you just sparge it out as in the batch. And that was, each one of these innovations. When they first come out, there are all kinds of skeptics that say, "Oh, that's not the way things are done."
Yeah.
But then they become, the normal way you do things. So
yeah,
the kind of luxury of having done this since time immemorial, or however long we've been doing this, is you do get to see the evolution of both the commercial side of things and the home side of things, and a lot of times the evolution on the home side of things drives what's happening on the commercial side of things. So
I definitely
that's my spiel. Your turn, Steve.
Well, Budweiser's got those new 898,000 gallon brew in a bag bags. They're really big.
You have to get Clydesdales and hook them up.
You have to drag them on a pulley. I agree with really everything James said. For me personally, switching to brew in a bag and switching to, if the recipe allows it, to a no-chill brew day is standard for me now. I rarely hook up the immersion chiller anymore. I generally do brew in a bag and then no chill, and then split the brew day over 2 days, so that I'm not doing so much work. And I would say also, part of getting older, and I don't want to do a 6 or 8 hour brew day anymore. I'm not interested in it.
Yeah.
So if I can kind of get everything ready on, Friday, and then brew on Saturday, and then pitch the yeast on Sunday and kind of clean up, it's just a little easier.
Yeah.
Plus the Brewlosophy guys have done a lot of experiments on short mash times and short boil times, and there's all kinds of things that that they're all the experiments that they're doing to challenge the common wisdom, the accepted wisdom in brewing is really interesting and fun.
Well, so you mentioned like home brewing scale things changing commercial side. I feel like for mead especially, it is such an old beverage that it's almost like people fight back against new things in the mead making world, especially when it comes to like using stuff like stabilizers or things like that. It's been a little bit of a battle to convince people that things are okay to use. It's okay to use a sorbate or a metabisulfite. I personally don't mind using them. I think there's an easy way to deal with things. I don't love pasteurizing. I've done it once or twice, and I always get so worried that for some reason, I've seen the horror stories of people blowing up bottles, or they pull the bottle out and somehow the bottle is cracked on the bottom and they're just mead falls out, stuff like that. And it's like, to me, it's not worth that sort of pain. But I do think that there are a lot of people who are worried about using new things. So hopefully we're getting to the point where homebrew scale is starting to impact commercial and people are okay with using those things. But mead is such an old beverage, and it's just hard to...
And you've stepped out there and, putting your experiments out there, doing experiments on the small scale, which is, what we started with. Way back in the day, our first video show was about a comparison of 2 batches of beer that I made in half-gallon growlers. So, but yeah, it's you have the scale and the ability to do things that a commercial brewery doesn't, or meadery doesn't. They're not going to waste a whole batch of expensive honey on some unproven technique. So
right.
Yeah, we can all work together and learn together and make a better product in the end.
Yeah, I it is interesting. There's very like. The mead making world the community is very divided. There's like the natural side of brewing, and then there's, I'll say the word unnatural, even though it's not really true. It's the willingness to use something like a sulfite or sorbate, and then that kind of the not. And there's a hard line. I mean, I feel like there's a Braveheart battle to be fought at some point in the future for brewing, and it's not great because it does separate the community out. We're kind of 2 different groups, and I'd love to divide or to not fix the divide and bring us together at some point, but it's hard to do that.
Oh, good thing that's the only part of things in this country that need.
Yeah, there's nothing else to worry about at all.
We're all together otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Shall we try the third?
Yeah.
Shared mead. That's a blueberry mead.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 7%.
Yep. So this is one I make a lot as well. It's pretty easy. You mentioned long brew days in beer. This one's a pretty easy one. The hardest part is the day before. I'll take, what do I use? About 2 pounds of blueberries per gallon for these normally, or 1.5 maybe, and throw in some pectic enzyme. Let it set for 24 hours, and I normally just let it set at room temp. Let that pectic enzyme 24, 48 hours of just setting. And then I take all my honey, take all my water, stick my drill in and blend it up as much as I possibly can, and throw in some 71B, I think is my main one I use here.
Very good.
Ferments, stabilize, and then back sweeten with honey. And that's about it. It's pretty.
So everything together in the primary then.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. And it's crystal clear, so those enzymes did their job. It's got a great nose on it. It smells like fruit.
It's a fun one. I enjoy it quite a bit, and it's all year round. That's what I like about blueberries. Blueberries are like probably my favorite fruit. It's like you can do it anytime.
Now, do you use the fresh, or have you tried the frozen?
I'm pretty much all frozen at this point because fresh gets really expensive. I mean, I can very rarely find fresh for like a regular price that I'm willing to pay. But I can go to Sam's or Costco or somewhere and get 4 pounds for still like $10 or $11. You know, it's when you're buying a lot of fruit, it can be a bunch, but you know, 8 pounds of fruit for a 5-gallon batch is not that bad. I'd say.
I used a steam juicer, and here we go on the steam juicer. For those who are familiar with us, but I used a steam juicer to juice some frozen blackberries for a beer, maybe was it a blackberry cream? What was it? Anyway, and it worked really well for the frozen fruit there. I used it on some frozen peaches, and it didn't work out well. Those were not good. So I think, you know, it probably depends on the fruit as to whether, you know, frozen is good enough or not. But these are certainly good. I get a fresh blueberry flavor out of this.
Well, and you have to. I feel like the challenge there is like the skins. I think that's what really helps this one, especially. It's 7% carbonated, so it should be carbonated. You know, it's going to have a little bit of lift from that, but it can still feel thin. And so you don't. That's what I don't like about low ABV meads is if you really don't give them any carbonation, it's just a watery mess. And so that adds a little bit of that tannin to it, and it's really not that hard to leave them on too, in my opinion. But I've wanted to try the steam juicer since I saw your video. That looked like a fun experiment, honestly.
Yeah, it works. It works well. Well, Steve actually had, and this is breaking news. Steve had a bad experience with the steam juicer.
Well, it's a buddy of mine gave me maybe 25 pounds of wild persimmons, which were frozen and lived in my freezer for some months. And finally, it got the gumption up to try to juice them using the juicer. And I did not have a good experience with the wild persimmons. Didn't want to juice. Well, they were juicing, but it just looked like, I don't want to eat that, and I don't want to drink that. And it was kind of scalding. I think, to be honest, to be fair to the juicer, I think I overloaded it. I filled it to the full fill line, and then I was constantly stirring, meshing around with these persimmons. It was just a hot mess. I ended up dumping the whole thing out. I was just like, I'm not a juicer.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really not blaming that on the juicer because that was partially my fault. In other words, how I used it. But I think that in hindsight, I'm probably going to be a fruit in the secondary kind of meat maker.
I'm not giving up. I just wonder. I wonder if you had thawed the fruit first. Number one.
I know there's all kinds of.
But then also you brought up in previous discussions on whether like the persimmons had a high pectin level or something that might have. Garrett, you might want to chime in on this. On your experience with different fruits. Do different fruits have different pectin levels? And in treating it that way with the heat and trying to steam the juice out of them, would that be activating something with the pectins? And
I definitely think so. I don't have raw science or to say anything, but there's definitely a difference between those pectins in every fruit, and so I imagine that it would be tough, like your peaches. Like to me, that the peaches are a great sign of I don't know the exact amount of pectin that's in those, but maybe they were less susceptible to be juiced well. All that fruit or that matter coming from it might be in the way of the juicer as well. But I've never used one. So like at the end of it, when you open that thing up, is it just a jammy mess horror show of obliterated fruit?
Well, I did persimmons.
I did fresh peaches and they turned out a lot better. And so I think they were just better peaches. At the end of it, the fruit material was like squishy and the juice that I got, because those peaches had skins on them, the juice had a nice pinkish hue, and it tasted good. And whereas the frozen ones, the little slices were still pretty much whole, and they were kind of rubbery, I think that those peaches were just not picked right. They were just like nasty peaches, I think. Not nasty, but just not good. I mean, they didn't taste good. So I think it was just bad quality fruit picked at the wrong time or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so Steve, you just said you're more of a secondary fruit kind of guy. Is that so? Over time, have you just had good experience with the secondary fruit, or like what's led you to do that more?
In general, I think you get a better fruit flavor, a better impact of the fruit flavor is more impactful if it's in the secondary. We've done or participated in a number of experiments over the years where we compare, say, a blueberry mead or a blackberry mead that had the fruit added in primary or added in secondary. And one of the experiments I'm thinking of in particular was at a homebrew con, and there might have been 20 people in the room in the tasting, as I recall. There were quite a number of folks. I think it was a brewlosophy thing too. I'm not sure, but I think it was. And at any rate, no one picked the primary fruit edition. Everyone preferred the secondary fruit edition. The truth of the matter is, if I was really serious about making a mead that I'm really going to be proud of, maybe enter it in a contest, or I'm just feeling the need to be particular, I'd do both. I'd do fruit in the primary, and then, back fruit it, with the fruit in the secondary, so that you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get that kind of light, airy fruit flavor that you get from a primary fermentation, coupled with that heavier, jammier fruit flavor that you get in a secondary fermentation or steeping process. And also you pick up a lot of color. And when you add that fruit, particularly a blueberry or blackberry, something that's got a lot of color in it to begin with, you're going to pick up that really pretty color in that secondary a lot more easily. And you do pick up the tannins and things like that help give the mead some structure so that it's not flabby. And again, I think those come through better when added in the secondary. Yeah. Just my opinion, but that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I've done a lot of testing. The one that's really coming to my mind is pineapple. I really wanted to see pineapple, like what's the difference between primary pineapple and secondary? And I get them flipped around now, but I remember one of them, I gotta think, the pineapple in the primary always ended up having a more warm sort of fruit profile. And to me, it was more equated to like the end of the pineapple taste. Like when you bite into one, it starts out kind of bright, and then you have the sweetness. When that primary state, I think this is right, the sweetness side was more elevated. And then the secondary was more of the bright beginning bite of that pineapple and stuff like that. That was a really interesting experiment, because that made me go, what about the other fruits? What's a plum going to do? And what's a blueberry going to do? I still have yet to do, obviously there's hundreds of fruits, so I'll never really hit this big test overall completely, but it's really fun to kind of mess around and go, what's going to happen with these different stages of fruit. And I'm just now getting into beer, trying to do some more with beer. And for the hundreds and thousands of hours I've spent in mead making, very little of it is transferred over to beer, because I'm now like brewing beer and I'm going, wait, mash? Hold on, I 149F? Like, wait, someone told me if I go to 151, this is going to pop out now.
Yeah,
and then,
you're going to ruin your beer.
Yeah. So like that's a whole new world.
That's one of the things that you got to throw away right away is your anxiety that you're going to ruin the beer. Yeah. Because I'm sure as you've learned with all the mead making that you've done, if you get a contamination, that is a sure way to ruin your product. Yeah. But if you screw up your recipe, if you put the hops in at the wrong time, or you don't hit your mash temperatures, or you really have to work hard to screw up a beer, because I mean you may not get the beer that you were wanting to, that the recipe was designed for, but maybe it'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
And so there's somebody said, relax, don't worry, have a homebrew.
Yeah.
Charlie Papazian, founder of the American Homebrewers Association, that was his mantra, and it's it's true. It's just and back in like when it took me forever to get into all grain brewing, because I was so intimidated by that process, because you start reading a book and the first thing it starts into the science about what happens in the mash, and I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So we actually learned how to do all grain brewing to do the all grain DVD. And it was like, this isn't hard. The hardest thing was hitting mash temperatures back when you had a cooler mash tun. Not cooler as in it's more cool than other things, but a mash tun made out of a cooler. But that's just math. But and then there's all these things about, if you mash too low, your beer will be too thin, and or all this stuff that just had me so worried. Turns out it's not that hard. It's not you're not gonna ruin your beer if you get a few degrees off in your mash temperature. So it takes a few batches of just doing it to get your confidence level, and to just say, so I went to lunch and I mashed for 90 minutes instead of 60 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal. So relax and have a
homebrew
while you're making your beer.
Well, and everybody brings their own personality to the hobby, meaning that some folks approach the hobby, many do, as an engineering project. So it's all about the hoses and the clamps and the pumps and the solid state instruction boards that they can program in, and it's really an engineering project, and that's fun for that brewer. Other brewers are like, I'm a cook, that's more me. I don't care about pumps and hoses.
Right.
I don't care about them at all. So give me a pot and a bucket and an airlock, and I'll make some beer, and it'll be pretty good beer. Now, will it be as good as somebody that could isolate all the oxygen all the time, forever? Well, maybe, probably, I don't know, or not as good, maybe. But my beer's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about it.
Well,
I always say as well, if it makes you more happy to be stressed out about every little detail, if you would be more stressed to do brewing in a lackadaisical style. Not saying Steve is,
Well, it's not lackadaisical. It's just low tech.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's nothing lackadaisical. It's just more the art of it instead of the science of it.
Yeah. I was looking on YouTube, and I regularly like to find, who's jumped into the hobby, especially for YouTube stuff. And I stumbled across a guy. He had probably 1,500 to 2,000 subscribers. And he's brewing beer. He's brewing on, I don't know, one of those SS Tech brew systems, the 3-stage. I was like, that's got to be expensive. This is a $6,500 system, and he's just brewing in his garage. And I was like, man, I understand the desire to do, because that did look fun. And there was a part of me that was like, man, that'd be so cool to have this system. But then I also enjoy kind of the simplicity of it, like you guys are saying, of let's just take a pot, let's just take a cheaper brewing system and see what happens here. Would it be nice to have pumps and the ability just to hit a button and you automatically move things around? Oh yeah, but
sure.
Is it worth it?
Well, I've seen your brewing space, Garrett. I mean, yours is pretty fancy. Yours is fancier than mine, so
I am very blessed. I have a fun situation here. Not quite in the. I feel like I was going for the look. I want the hangout zone. That's my goal here.
No, it's awesome. I'm kidding you, but our friend Matt Giovanisi in Colorado, we've been he does the Brew Cabin channel, and we've been collaborating on recipe development. He's got just nearly commercial. If it was bigger, it would be a commercial system. And that, and I can see the appeal. But I don't. Number one, I don't have the space for that. my system I can fold up and throw in the basement, and bring it out. My brew table is literally a piece of plywood and two sawhorses, that I do out on the patio. But it's all in what makes you happy. I mean, that's the thing is, I've got a small SUV that's nothing fancy, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But somebody else might have, a 1965 Ford Mustang with flames on the side, and all the, it's all that's part of the beauty about home brewing is that you can bring to it what you want to bring to it.
Well, that's actually where I was headed when I brought the topic up, was that everybody can bring, their own. Just got a text from my wife telling me she's out of tequila. Jeez. And I've lost.
She's like, don't come home. Don't enter the room until you got more tequila.
I don't know where that came from. Just this text popped up. I'm out of tequila. Okay.
That's funny.
Well, speaking of which, it doesn't have any tequila in it, but allegedly, I'm drinking the Pina Colada mead.
Yeah,
or I'm about to.
Yeah.
So I don't like getting caught in the rain.
Well, I don't either.
This one's that one's a little bit of a. Well, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make a Pina Colada mead. And first of all, coconut is so hard to use in brewing. I don't know if you've done much with it, but it is not a friendly thing to avoid oils. So that used a medley of things between coconut chips and I eventually just gave up and stopped trying to add more coconut chips because it got kind of crazy, and ended up adding some that Malibu. Is it Malibu? Whatever the white bottle rum is, that's the coconut. And, so a little bit of that, and then of course pineapple in there, and carbonated, because I feel like that's just, I like these lower strength things because you can have more than one. That's the big thing for me, is sometimes one bottle of mead when it's 14% and you're like, I'm done for the night. If I can have 2 pints of something, that's pretty good to me. So
it's delicious. I don't have a lot of experience with rum drinks because I had one bad experience with rum drinks when I was in college. So since then, but I like it. I don't, I get it. I'm averse to rum, but this is good. And mead seems to lend itself to, mimicking cocktails as well. Was it an old fashioned that Tim Lieber shared with us? He cloned an old fashioned.
Oh, gosh.
He cloned a cocktail with mead, and it was really, really good. And this is as well. It's I'm scared that I'm by myself here giving tasting notes without Steve to back me up on this one, because it's smooth and
tastes like honey and
it tastes like heartache. No, it's good. It's good. I get the components. I get the piña, the pineapple, and maybe it's a good thing I don't get a lot of the rum.
It wasn't really meant to add rum flavor. It was more to get that. I was trying to get coconut, without adding a flavoring. I used to be unofficially, I think the mead rep for Amaretti for a long time, because we just had a little friendship, and they just kept sending me stuff. And so I used to use these flavorings for a long time. Nothing wrong with them by any means, but when you're making YouTube videos and teaching people how to do stuff, they're like not too happy when you're like, go buy this flavoring and add it in. They want to do it more naturally. So I kind of moved away from those, and coconut's just hard. I'd be curious to see how other people have got coconut flavors, but the oils in them really mess you up. It's hard to do brewing with them.
I get more of the coconut on the nose, ironically, than tasting it. Which usually it's harder the other way around.
Yeah.
But maybe the flavor of the pineapple and the honey is masking the flavor of the coconut, but I do get, coconut aromatics. So it's good. I mean, I haven't had many, if any, pina coladas, but I mean, this tastes pretty darn good.
Thank you. Steve, did you end up opening that hopped mead?
Not yet. I'm getting ready to. I was going to comment on the 3 that we've already had.
Yeah.
And just say that it's clear that they've all been brewed by the same mazer. So they share a lot in common. You could just tell they've come from the same brew house or mead house. As they've warmed a little bit, the blueberry really holds up very well. The cucumber, not so much as it's gotten hot. So in other words, it's basically at room temperature at this point. But the other 2, who are both about room temp, they've really held up well. And I think of the 3 that we did, the apple, the blueberry, and the cucumber, all 3 are very good meads, and I'd be proud to have said that I brewed any one of them. The blueberry is my favorite. I really like that a lot. You captured the berry well, and in both actually all 3 of them, there's that little bit of residual honey sweetness that you just kind of have on the tip of your tongue or on your lips a little bit. It's just like, there's the honey right at the end, and it's really nice. So these are very nice session meads, and congratulations, because all 3 are very, very good. And now I'm going to open the hop mead. So tell me about this mead.
Well, first, I'm gonna give my feedback since you did the roundup. I'm leaning toward the apple cinnamon, and maybe it's because it makes me nostalgic for Apple Jacks.
Gotta be it.
I haven't had Apple Jacks in a long time, but in a good way. It's that fresh apple character, and then the fresh cinnamon character. I kind of agree, although I'm not as down on the cucumber at room temperature as you are, but I do. The room temperature, a little bit of astringency is coming out that I didn't get on when it was colder. But it's meant to be drunk cold, and
exactly. So again, I didn't really mean that as a diss on it, and I know it came out that way. It was just that the apple cinnamon and the blueberry, I also think, are just a tad sweeter, and so that sweetness stays with you a little bit longer. There's a little. They finish a little longer. The cucumber finishes a little quicker. It shuts off, and the flavor of it just goes away more quickly. I think it has a small, it's a little bit savory. There's a little savoriness to the cucumber, which you would expect, and it's really nice. It's not expected, and it's beautiful. I don't know. That's it. That's all I got. I'm wiped out.
Well, I appreciate you guys. You guys are so kind. I love getting to share stuff, especially like session meads. I feel like most meads I first started with were like big bodied. Like, I don't think my first year brewing I did anything below like 14%. I was just like, I'm going for it, which is something a lot of mead makers do. It's not a bad thing. You just have to let those set for quite some time before they're really gonna be as enjoyable as you want,
Yeah.
Well, there was a trend when we first started brewing that you bought the pale ale kit from the homebrew shop, and then your next beer was going to be a barley wine, or next year was going to be a Scottish ale. It's like, well, how much alcohol can we put in there? We Steve and I don't think trended toward that, but it seemed to be the thing that people wanted to do is like, oh, let's see how big we can get right off the bat, which is a mistake. Because those are really hard to do. But I generally brew my meads to be somewhere between 10 and 13%. Almost all the mead I make is right there.
Yeah.
And I tend to make still meads. I don't carbonate them generally. Not always, but I kind of like, that's kind of a sweet spot for me, just because once you get up into the 14, 15, 16% range, again, they take a long time to mature before they're really good to drink. And they tend to be too sweet for me. It's really dessert. And I like that, fine. but I want to be able to drink a glass of wine or a glass of mead and have the whole evening with it.
Yeah.
So I tend to go for kind of a white wine strength, 10, 11, 12%. It's kind of it's a good good landing spot for me. And that's what I do.
Yeah. So that hop
And
mead,
not too sweet. And I don't like them to be too sweet either. I've had a lot of good meads, quite good meads, say poured for me at HomebrewCon. And the vintner or the mazer or whatever you call them, they're very proud of it, and they should be. But honestly, they're like drinking cough syrup.
yeah.
They're so sweet and they're so thick and they're so, and I'm just like, well, that's really good.
Yeah.
But give me some pancakes. I'll pour this over them,
Yeah.
and everything will be great. So you can't drink more than 2 or 3 or 4 ounces of that, and you're just done because you're going to be diabetic if you.
And a lot of the things, one of the good things about going to like HomebrewCon is that you do get small samples, and like if somebody gives you a curry beer, you'll drink that, or there are other beers that we've had that's the proper size of a sample. It's just like, that tastes really good.
Yeah.
Whether I would want a pint of that, probably not. But I'm glad I had that, and it was well made and a fun experiment. But
We have a lot of those at our mead competition where they're really good. They're like, big berry bombs where someone's pressed like 60 pounds of fruit and they yield like 3 gallons of juice. And you're like, what on earth? And then they dump like...
They need a steam juicer.
And then they dump like 30 pounds of honey on that, and it's like, you taste it, you're like, oh man, this is like syrupy. And it is good. But that little pour that I had, I'm like, I can't do more than that because I just can't. My body literally at some point goes, what are you doing to me right now? Why are you doing this? This isn't normal.
Wilfred Brimley is over your shoulder. Steve, have you got the hopped mead?
Yeah, it's very good. What kind of hops are in it?
So on that label, I'm curious, is there any, is it say CB? Because I make a bunch of these now, and I'm a little bit, I don't know which one I sent you at this point. Just like that. Okay, so I think let's see, I got to go back to my...
It doesn't say CV. It just says hopped mead, 5% ABV. That's it.
That might be... No, that's not that one. I've made so many of these recently.
We've done so many hop samplers. You should be able to just pick that out.
Well, I was going to say it tastes like a New World hop.
It is. I think it's Cashmere and Pacific Jade. If I'm looking at my...
That's the exact 2 I was going to pick.
Whoa!
You just didn't give him enough time.
Yeah.
You just didn't give me enough time.
Cut you off. Sorry. So
they are definitely, they have that kind of over the top New World hop thing going for them. And sure enough, they are, even though they're like New Zealand or Australia. I don't know where they come from, but
yeah,
but not noble hops from Europe. And I could at least tell that. And otherwise, the mead's very nice. I've had some hop meads before. This one's as good as any that I've had. Again, all your meads are very clean. Your fermentation process and how you treat the product, you can tell you treat it with care and with consideration, because none of these have anything weird going on in them. There's no defects. There's no weird hop character. I mean yeast character.
So Garrett, talk about how did you get the hop flavor into that mead?
Yeah.
So I did on this one. I'm assuming that this is this one. I did some boiling. I boiled half ounce cashmere hops. This is for a 5-gallon batch. Half an ounce of cashmere hops and half an ounce of Pacific Jade for 20 minutes. And
just in water, or
just did it in regular oil water, and then I did a dry hop for I think like 3 or 4 days. After that, I used citrus blossom honey, Kavai Kvass. Speaking of those, and fermented hot, and did the dry hopping thing, then stabilized and back sweetened with some more citrus honey.
Wow, I'm envious. I mean, I'm enjoying the pina colada mead, but and I gave Steve the choice. I was like, which one?
Yeah,
and he picked the hopped one. So
Well,
wow.
I enjoy getting to like try those things. Like hops are so fun, and that's one thing I'm a little jealous of you, Steve, and your experience with hops, because in my beer, the fear of mashing that I'm going through now is only fixed by the excitement for all the hops I can use. There's so many hop profiles, and you walk in a homebrew store and you're like, especially for hopped mead, I'm looking at the giant sheet and going, oh, this one has this and this and this, and it's just so cool to mix and match. It's a giant sandbox that seems endless.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Sure.
Garrett, can I give you a hint or a tip?
Yeah.
My wife Susan and I, we bottled 3 small batches today, 3 6-packs for the next hop sampler, which will be hop sampler number 21, Steve, the next time when this bottle conditions.
Old enough to drink.
That's right. But this is the procedure that I do for the hop samplers. I take 3 quarts of water, filtered water, obviously, and then I warm that up, and into that 3 quarts of water, I put 1 pound or 450 grams of Pilsen Light dry malt extract, and you can buy that from your homebrew store. They have the 1 pound bags. So you put that into the water, you stir it up, and just as it gets up to boiling, it starts to bubble, it starts to boil, you shut off the heat, and then you add hops. And in this case, in one batch, I added 1 ounce or 28 grams of Nectaron. In another batch, I added 23 grams of Idaho 7, and I weighted these for the alpha acid percentage, so that they would all 3 be sort of the same. And then in the third batch, I put 13 grams of Vic Secret, which is 21.5% alpha acid.
Oh, wow!
So you just once you get that wort with the extract just up to the boil, you shut off the heat, you add your hops, and then you set it aside for 10 minutes to do a 10-minute hop stand, and then you chill it in an ice bath. And so once it's chilled in the ice bath to pitching temperature, you rack it into your jug, your 1 gallon jug, and then you pitch yeast. In this case, I used in each of these batches 3 grams of USO5, Safale USO5, which is the California ale yeast. And, 1 packet of that is like 11.5 grams.
Yeah.
Then you let it ferment, and then you siphon off into we went straight into the bottles with we get the little mini auto siphon. And then we primed each bottle with a carbonation drop. They look like the little hard candies.
Yeah.
And then, so that's each one of those pounds of, each pound of malt extract yields a 6-pack of beer. It started out at 1066. So did the Battle of Hastings. And it ended up at 1009. For an ABV of 7.5%. So, pretty big beer.
That's a big beer, yeah.
But they're substantially hoppy. And I'm looking forward to comparing, Steve, to sharing these with you and comparing these, because it's going to be a fun batch. And we've done like 20 more of these. And that is a really easy way, because each 6-pack is like, an hour to brew, because you're just bringing like 3 quarts of water up to the boil, resting it for 10 minutes, and then chilling it.
Yeah.
And you can chill down, a gallon of, or little less than a gallon of wort in an ice bath, in like 10, 15,
15
minutes,
yeah. And so
that's fun.
That's a really, you don't need to boil extract, because it's all grain wort that has been boiled and has had most of, if not all, the water taken out of it. So it's, all the things that you need to do to boil wort, it's been done. And just doing the hop stand for 10 minutes, at that boiling temperature, you really get a lot of those fresh, aromatic and flavorful hop compounds. And we found that it's a really fun way to get some really delicious hoppiness out of a really simple process. and just the beers are really some of the
Some of
beers
them
are really
Some of
good.
them are killer good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them not so much, but mostly they're really good.
Yeah.
That's
So
fun.
there you go. That's
I
your
need to try
tip
that
for the day.
Yeah, I need to try that at some point because the world of hops is so fun, and I feel like, well, with mead especially, you then have your other side of like honey. What kind of honey am I going to use? And that could be its own like a whole other thing. All the thousands of kinds of honey in the world.
Yeah, we've been lucky to. I think Mike Lozano shared some really good meads with us with different honey varieties, and Tim Lieber has been sharing some really good meads with us with different honey varieties, and the type of honey does make a difference. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be flavoring it, it makes less of a difference. You just have to have a good base honey, but you can make some really delicately flavored, really interesting meads with these weird varietal, like the lychee. That was so good. It's just amazing what these bees do.
It's crazy. It is so fun. I mean, I've bought hundreds of pounds of honey and everything I can find, and I still have only scratched the surface of like, because every year's different. It's a whole wormhole of what's going on there. So I appreciate you guys doing some tasting and helping me out and being part of this podcast. And I love getting to chat with people who have done. You guys are way more experienced than me, and I felt a little intimidated because you guys have had years more experience of like just getting to talk and try new things. So it's been kind of fun.
We learn from everybody we talk to. I still don't feel like an expert, even though I've been doing this for a long time, and I learn so much every time I talk to somebody else, and we've learned tonight, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, Garrett, and we hope I hope that you continue on with what you're doing. You're doing great work. Keep it up.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
How can we support you guys? Where can I send people and websites? Obviously the channel, those things.
Well, you can make your checks out to Steve Wilkes.
That's right.
Fayetteville, Arkansas. The checks will be cashed.
The Tequila Fund.
Yeah.
Fund. That's how it works. Cash talks. BS walks.
No, check us out. We're on all the podcasting things, Basic Brewing Radio, and you can listen. All the archives are still free, and you can find them all the way back to July of 2005 on the audio side, and find us on YouTube and go to basicbrewing.com where you can find both the audio and video episodes. And I don't know, shoot us an email if you got a question or a comment, or, be nice, but no, we love I've had some mead, so I'm going to be sentimental. The best thing about this whole thing is being forced to spend time with one of my best friends in the whole world, Steve Wilkes. And, I'm grateful every day for, every time we get together, that we cheers, that we have a good reason to get together, and we usually have fun and drink some good stuff when we do. So that's if there's nothing else, this has been a really good experience.
Except for that damn pond we had to sit in front of.
I didn't know it was going to be so hot.
It was about 158 degrees.
No, wasn't that morning?
I almost had a stroke.
You guys it's been really fun to watch you guys, especially because you do fun videos. But then also my buddy BC, whose channel's doing the most, we both live close to each other as well. And I know it's like rare to get people who are both home brewers and can spend time together. So it's like looking at you guys going like, oh, we get to like, that's kind of like what we're doing now. And just imagining like that friendship. You guys have blossomed over years, That's like,
it's all the bees
super
around
fun
us.
To see.
I've blossomed way more than I need to, I can tell you.
You're like, sometimes I wish it hadn't blossomed. Oh man. Well, I'll be taking and putting all the links I can find, of course, to Basic Brewing Radio. The fun part is most of the people who are going to listen to this podcast will have started with you guys, and so it's kind of like this wormhole of like we just keep, I'm going to shoot them back to you, but we're just going to keep doing this.
Its tail.
Yeah, which it's kind of fun. But I will definitely, of course, for anyone who doesn't know and has not heard you guys, I'll put all the links I can find below. But I do appreciate you guys spending some time and taking away from your wives. And I know there's some tequila.
They appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to get some more tequila. And, I don't know what James' wife needs right now, but maybe it's tequila.
She's self-sufficient. Thanks.
She's
Jared.
she's saying, stay away.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, we'll chat again soon in the future. This is not the last box of mead you guys will get from me because I look forward to sharing even more in the future. So,
Woohoo!
Cheers to you guys.
Great.
Cheers.
Sure.